key things that you need to do this winter cold and flu season, and while coronavirus is around, is to reduce inflammatory food. So ultimately you want to aim for a low inflammation diet. The reason being is that foods that cause inflammation in the body deplete your immune system function. They deplete the resources, deplete the antibodies and the white blood cells that are your army to fight the battles should an invader, which is a virus, cold or flu, come in. So it literally reduces your army, which you really need on hand during these winter months, and obviously to ward off viruses like coronavirus. So foods that cause inflammation in the body, and I always think of inflammation in a chronic sense as disease, would be your sugars, your processed foods, alcohol with your sugar of course, your processed and refined foods and carbs, and other things like gluten for a lot of people as well. And so what you want to do is instead you want to incorporate all these wonderful foods that replenish the immune system, that reduce inflammation in the body and disease, and along with that support a great weight management. They're good for the mood, great for aiding good rest and sleep, and this includes your veggies and fruits. You want to get a big array of veggies and fruits, so think 8 to 10 serves for an average adult. Usually you'd have 5 serves by the age of 5, and you want it to be an array of colours, so think like a rainbow. And you want a lot of the green leafies in there, a lot of that really good roughage and fibre, which will also help with methylation and help with detoxification, so helping getting rid of those nasties and bacteria at the same time. So you want all the wastes coming out, and you want to have great nutrients coming in, because a toxic body that is deficient in nutrients is one that is going to be more susceptible to illness, and that is when your immune system is really under attack. So my number one food, my top food to reduce, avoid, and hopefully one day eliminate is sugar. We all knew it, I didn't need to say it. We've all heard about the sugar story, I'm sure, and it is a really difficult one to avoid. And it's not just because it tastes good. It's actually been shown in studies to be highly addictive. So much so that a recent study showed in this small group subset of people that it was as addictive as a drug. So that people that were abusing sugar didn't get as addicted to drugs. So it was shown as to be more addictive than cocaine, which is kind of crazy if you think about, but it is a highly addictive, horrible substance. It truly is. And that's probably why it tastes so good. And I know many of us have different ways of keeping sugar out of our lives. We're trying to be healthy. And I always hear, I just don't have it in the house. If it's not in the house, we won't eat it. And yeah, that can help, because if you have 2 to 4 weeks off sugar, you actually change your taste buds, and you can change the way your brain and your serotonin accepts sugar, and you can change the way you eat and the types of foods you eat. But unfortunately with sugar, you only need a little bit of it, and then it takes you right back there. The other point I'd like to make about sugar is that it's been shown to severely suppress the immune system. There was a study that showed that having only 100 grams of sugar could suppress the immune system, and that within 15 minutes of these case studies having the sugar, they were not at the same ability to fight off pathogens, and their immune system was quite depleted. Another study showed that within 5 hours of having sugar, they were unable to fight off bacteria and viruses and colds and flus. So if you think about that, that's not great when the coronavirus is around. So, and you'll certainly become more susceptible and more at risk to the coronavirus if you have a lot of sugar. I do have some good news. I know this isn't a great thing to hear, but I do have some good news. I'm very much about replacing habits with another healthier habit, and I do that with a lot of my clients. And the reason that I do that is we are creatures of habit. we do like to have our little habits, and we do like to have our comforts. And I understand at the moment with financial situations changing, some people losing their job, the stress of having to homeschool, and all those other factors are potentially going to cause more stress in the body. And we do reach for comfort foods. And the good news is that you can do that. You just need to swap it for another substance that isn't addictive and is actually a lot better for you, but still gives you that sweet hit. The best news about my top 3 is that they're low GI foods. And what that means is that they don't raise the blood sugar levels. So they keep blood glucose low. So you can enjoy them, and they're good for you. They support an enhanced and boosted immune system, but you can still get that lovely sweet taste. So my top 3, and probably only 3 to some extent, would be stevia, maple syrup, and raw honey. But you want good quality maple syrup and good quality honey. My brother-in-law is a beekeeper part-time, so we get great, fantastic local raw honey. And Manuka is fantastic too. If you can get your hands on Manuka, it's anti-medicinal, antimicrobial, antifungal. It's amazing. Put it on cuts and sores. Have it, a lot of it, when you're sick, with a wonderful sort of ginger and garlic lemon sort of tea. But yeah, honey is amazing too, and honey's full of all these vitamins. You've got your vitamin A, C, your B's, your K. You've also got your iron and zinc and other minerals like magnesium in it. It's a really rich source of health. You don't need too much of it. It's not so healthy if you have a whole thing of honey to yourself. But just adding a little teaspoon to some tea, or a little teaspoon, and drizzle it over your coconut yogurt, and berries, wonderful. And berries are another great source. They're high superfood, really rich in antioxidants and fantastic for you. Really great way to get your little sweet hit. I love nothing more for supper than some coconut yogurt with a few little seeds and maybe some cacao or something like that, which is another superfood and wonderful for the immune system. And then you sprinkle some great berries. Now, organic is always best because berries can be quite high in pesticides and fertilizers and things like that. So a really great little biohack for that is to get the organic frozen ones. You can get them from all the supermarkets. They're slightly more expensive. However, because they're frozen, you tend to only take a few at a time. It's not that they waste in the fridge. I tend to find we spend lots of money on these great sort of local farm fresh berries, which are great if you can do it, but you don't get through them all and they can go off quite quickly in the fridge. Another thing you could do with those, I suppose, is to put some in the fridge, and you can even put them in little ice cubes and things like that. The other thing about these medicinal sweeteners, especially stevia is a good example of that, is it's great for chronic illnesses. So stevia has been shown in studies to ward off obesity and diabetes, which are the 2 highest risk factors for coronavirus, and also for infections like Borrelia, Lyme's disease, which I've been on a journey with for the last 9 years. So yes, stevia has been a staple part of my diet. And what you find as well, if you do a lot of baking with your kids, over time your kids don't even notice. It tastes very similar to sugar. You don't need as much of it. And if you start while they're young, that's all they're gonna know. So sugar would be my number 1. Number 2 would be your processed foods, the foods that are full of all those chemicals and hormones and added preservatives and sugars, and they've got a bit of everything in it. It's not a proper food. It's not a food from the ground. It's not a food that makes sense that it would even be digested well from the body. A lot of these processed foods, they're just chemicals. And so your body doesn't really know how to process it. And when it gets into your digestive system, more often than not, they can get stuck there. And over time, this fungi and bacteria, which is all part of the microbiome, you need to have a little bit of it, but over time they can build their army by living off all of these old food scraps. And I always find, interestingly, that when people do my detox programs, they're always like, I can't believe how much I'm going to the toilet. And what happens is once you start providing that healthy, alkalinic environment in your small and large intestines and your colon, and you're also eating a lot of fiber, and fiber acts like a scrub to scrub out all of that bacteria and viruses, that you you've got a lot of going to the toilet to do, a lot of pooping, and it's a really good thing. You want to be getting waste out and nutrients in. Don't forget that. The best thing for immune system, waste out, nutrients in. And there's always going to be toxins in the air. I'll get onto that later, but there's always going to be toxins in your food, in the air, what you breathe, absorb, drink, eat. So it's a really good idea to be having lots of those really great fibrous foods and not so much of the processed foods. And then we've got gluten. Now, gluten was something in wheat that I think we were always able to digest it in some way, shape or form. But then in modern day farming, a lot has changed. And there's other factors that have now contributed to gluten being more of an issue for many of us these days. So we've all heard about celiac disease, and there's other inflammatory bowel disease caused by gluten. But now many of us have gluten sensitivity. And it doesn't always start the first time you have it, or even the 50th time you've had it. It's in part because we're eating so much more gluten these days. So an average Australian diet, the sad diet I call it unfortunately, is the standard Australian diet. Would have, your cereals for breakfast and your breads and toasts. You've got your sandwiches and your rolls and your baps and your wraps for lunch, and then you've got your pastas for dinner. I think we can all contest to that, considering we saw the shelves stripped bare during the first couple of weeks of coronavirus because everyone was eating pasta, right? It was the number one top food. So that says to me there's a lot of pasta being eaten. The other thing is, unfortunately, modern day gluten isn't as high in nutrients, and there's a number of reasons for that. Predominantly, the soils are deficient, so they're much more deficient in your minerals and your magnesiums, your zinc, your iodine, all the things that are needed for a healthy microbiome and a healthy gut. But also, unfortunately, wheat is processed in a much more highly processed, faster, quicker, get-to-shelf way, which means they're using more pesticides, fertilizers, fungicides, all of those chemicals that are not very good for us, and our microbiome and our gut really doesn't like it. And that's where 70% of our immune system resides. So it's not great for our immune system either. And glyphosate is one of the worst, and this is why there is such a problem in America, because everything conventional is sprayed with glyphosate in America, and we're following that trend here in Australia. It's not good for us. And so if you get sort of non-organic wheat products, you are going to be dealing with glyphosate, and it really disrupts the microbiome, it disrupts the immune system, and it actually disrupts the metabolism. And this is why, one of the reasons why obesity is on the rise in countries like America and Australia. To which I lead to inflammation. It causes a lot of inflammation. Inflammation leads to being overweight, and it leads to disease amongst a number of other issues in the body. So I recommend for every single person to really change the way they look at their standard diet and have a lot less gluten. Replace it with other foods that can be just as filling and just as nourishing and just as comforting. You just have to change the way you think. And once you understand the processes and what's going on in your body, it makes it a lot easier to do that.